Most people I meet think my job is a nightmare. Honestly, I used to laugh whenever someone told me that. You see, I'm a cell tower technician, one of those crazy people you've probably seen in videos, dangling hundreds of feet above the ground with nothing but a harness and a love for heights to keep us going. It's the kind of job that makes people think, why would anyone willingly do that? But I had my reasons. For one, it's one of the best paying gigs you can get in my neck of the woods without a high school diploma. For another, it offers the kind of thrill you can't find anywhere else, an adrenaline rush that kept me hooked from day one. There's a certain peace in the isolation too. Out there on those remote towers, it's just me, the steel and the wind. No one to bother me, no noise, just the open sky and the thrill of climbing. I'd always thought I was fearless, the type of guy who could stare down danger without flinching. I loved the job, and even more than the job, I loved base jumping from the top of those towers. For the uninitiated, base jumping is basically throwing yourself off a tall structure like a building, antenna, or cliff, with nothing but a parachute to save you. To me, it was the ultimate high, and these remote towers were perfect for it. But 2 weeks ago, something changed. A job took me to a place I'll never forget, a tower far out in the Appalachian wilderness. It wasn't supposed to be anything special, just a routine maintenance call to replace one of those blinking aircraft warning lights. Yet it turned into the single most terrifying experience of my life. One that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about fear and survival. Looking back, there were signs. The mist that hung low over the hollows that morning. The eerie stillness in the air. The locals call it moonshine weather, a signal to stay home and wait it out. But I ignored the warnings, eager for the climb. The tower was about 50 miles from the nearest town, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the mountains. It stood 400 feet tall, an imposing skeleton of steel rising into the endless gray sky. I parked my truck just outside the chain-link fence that surrounded the site. The gate was secured with an electronic lock, but the razor wire topping the fence was rusted and crumbling. It was obvious that no one visited this place often. The maintenance shed nearby was a testament to that. It was covered in layers of graffiti, some of it old and faded, others more recent. Whoever had painted it had gotten creative, scrawling bright shapes and patterns over the dull corrugated metal. I grabbed the tools and the replacement bulb from the shed, tossing them into my rucksack alongside my climbing gear and parachute. The air felt heavy, the kind of oppressive weight you feel before a storm. But the forecast had been clear, no rain, no wind, just the lingering mist that had settled into the valleys like a shroud. I chalked it up to nerves, shook it off, and began the climb. There's a rhythm to climbing these towers, a repetitive motion that becomes almost meditative. Hand over hand, foot after foot, I worked my way up the structure. The metal rungs were cold under my gloves, slick with condensation from the mist. About 50 feet up, I paused to clip my harness to the tower. Most climbers do this at every rung as a safety precaution, but I rarely bothered unless the wind was strong. That day the air was unnervingly still, so I kept going without clipping in again. As I climbed higher, the fog seemed to thicken instead of thinning out like it usually does. By the time I reached 150 feet, visibility had dropped to almost nothing. The world below me was a blank canvas of swirling gray, the landscape swallowed by the mist. It felt like I was climbing into another dimension, cut off from the world I knew. The only sounds were the metallic clink of my boots on the rungs and the steady rhythm of my breathing. It was at the 200-foot mark that I saw it for the first time. I'd stopped for a quick break, hooking my harness to the tower so I could lean back and rest my arms. That's when I made the mistake every climber is warned against. I looked down. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. There, in the mist below, was a shadowy figure clinging to the side of the tower. It was far enough away that I couldn't make out any details, just a dark shape against the dull gray. My initial reaction was confusion. Who else would be out here climbing this tower in the middle of nowhere? My first thought was some kind of daredevil or graffiti artist. Maybe someone had seen the graffiti on the shed and decided to take it to the next level. But as I watched, something about the figure's movements struck me as off. It climbed too fluidly, too quickly, its limbs moving with an unnatural grace. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the shape was still there, slowly closing the distance between us. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to keep climbing. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or my imagination running wild in the fog. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just a person, maybe another technician. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. At 300 feet, I stopped again, panting for breath, my muscles burning from the relentless climb. I glanced down, half hoping the shadow would be gone, that it had been nothing more than a figment of my imagination. But it was closer now, much closer. The details were clearer this time, and what I saw made my stomach lurch. The thing below me wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its body too thin, its movements too fluid. Its skin was dark and glistening like it was coated in oil. But the worst part was its face, or what passed for one. Pale, milky white eyes stared up at me from a snub-nosed face, its lips curling back to reveal rows of jagged black teeth. I froze, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I was seeing. Every rational thought fled, replaced by a primal, bone-deep terror. Whatever that thing was, it was climbing faster now, its long arms swinging effortlessly from rung to rung. I didn't wait to see how close it would get. I climbed like a man possessed, my hands and feet moving on autopilot, driven by pure adrenaline. All thoughts of safety were gone. I didn't bother clipping my harness anymore, didn't stop to rest. I just kept climbing, every instinct screaming at me to get away from the thing below. The fog was so thick now that I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The metal rungs were slick with moisture, and I nearly slipped more than once. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. At 350 feet, I risked another glance down. The creature was even closer now, its pale eyes locked onto mine. Its mouth opened, revealing layer upon layer of jagged teeth, like some kind of grotesque nesting doll. A low, guttural sound rose from its throat halfway between a growl and a hiss. Panic took over completely. I climbed the final stretch in a blind frenzy, my mind consumed by a single thought: reach the top. When I finally reached the summit, my arms felt like they were on fire and my lungs were burning with each ragged breath. My shaking hands gripped the rungs as I hauled myself onto the small platform at the top of the tower. The world around me was an endless sea of grey mist, and the air felt heavier than ever, as if it were pressing down on me. For a brief, fleeting moment I thought I was safe. The platform was small, barely enough room for one person to stand comfortably. The maintenance hatch for the uppermost aircraft warning light was locked with a padlock, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd left the key in my rucksack halfway down the tower. Swearing under my breath, I fumbled at my belt, searching for anything I could use to break the lock. My fingers found the hammer I carried for maintenance work, and without thinking I swung it with all my might. The metal rang out in sharp, deafening notes, each strike louder than the last. It took 3 swings before the lock broke, the shattered pieces falling through the grated platform to the mist below. I shoved the hatch open and ducked inside, closing it behind me and securing it with the broken padlock. My hands were trembling so badly that it took several tries to fasten it. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. The interior of the platform was cramped and cold, but at least it felt like a barrier between me and whatever was climbing up after me. I leaned against the metal wall, my heart pounding in my chest, and tried to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. But then, through the slats of the grated platform, I saw it. The creature's long, glistening arm reached up, its fingers curling around the edge of the platform. One limb, then another, and then its grotesque face appeared, milky white eyes staring straight at me. It moved with a terrifying deliberation, hoisting its unnaturally long body onto the platform. Its head twisted at an impossible angle, its jaw opening wide to reveal rows of jagged black teeth. It hissed, the sound reverberating through the metal structure like the warning of a venomous snake. My mind screamed at me to move, to do something, anything. But my body was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer horror of what I was witnessing. The creature began to claw at the hatch, its bony fingers scraping against the metal. In that moment, I realized I had only one option: the parachute. It was still strapped to my back, my last chance of escape. My hands fumbled with the harness, checking and rechecking the straps as the creature's claws scraped against the hatch, each sound louder and more frantic than the last. I knew the jump was a gamble. The fog was so thick that I couldn't see the ground, couldn't even tell which direction the meadow I'd scouted earlier was in. For all I knew, I could be leaping into a tree, or worse, a rock face. But staying meant certain death, or worse. The hatch groaned under the creature's weight as it began to wrench it open. With a deep breath, I forced myself to move. I threw the hatch open, ducking under its grasping claws, and clambered onto the platform. The creature's head snapped toward me, its mouth opening wide in a grotesque snarl. Without hesitation, I threw myself off the edge of the platform. The wind tore at my face and body as I plummeted through the mist, my heart hammering in my chest. Normally, this was the moment I lived for, the rush of adrenaline, the freedom of flight. But this time, all I felt was fear. My mind screamed at me to pull the ripcord, to get the parachute open as quickly as possible. I yanked the cord with all my strength, and for a split second I thought it wasn't going to open. Then, with a violent tug, the parachute deployed, jerking me upright. The descent slowed, and I clung to the steering lines, my knuckles white with strain. I glanced up, half expecting to see the creature leaping after me, but the mist obscured everything above. All I could do was pray that it wasn't following. The ground emerged suddenly, trees appearing like jagged silhouettes in the grey. I tried to steer toward an open area, but the wind was uncooperative, shoving me into the dense forest. Branches whipped against my face and arms, tearing at my clothes as I hurtled downward. The impact was brutal. My body slammed into the side of the chain-link fence surrounding the tower's base, the razor wire slicing into my arms and hands. I collapsed in a heap, gasping for air, my parachute tangled in the wire above me. Blood dripped from my hands as I tore myself free from the razor wire, adrenaline numbing the pain. I staggered to my feet, my legs shaking, and scanned the sky above. The mist swirled like smoke, and for a moment I thought I saw a dark shape moving through it, circling like a bird of prey. Panic drove me forward. My jeep was parked just outside the fence, a beacon of salvation in the oppressive grey. I stumbled toward it, each step sending waves of pain through my battered body. The world around me felt surreal, as if I were moving through a nightmare I couldn't wake from. As I reached the jeep, a shadow passed overhead. I looked up just in time to see the creature diving toward me, its membranous wings spread wide, its eyes locked onto mine. Its descent was silent, predatory, like a hawk closing in on its prey. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut just as the creature landed on the roof with a bone-jarring thud. Its claws scraped against the metal, and I could hear its guttural hissing through the thin barrier. My hands fumbled with the keys, blood slicking the steering wheel as I jammed them into the ignition. The engine sputtered once, twice, and then roared to life. I floored the accelerator, the jeep lurching forward with a jolt that sent the creature tumbling off the roof. In the rearview mirror, I saw it land on all fours, its pale eyes glowing with fury as it watched me speed away. I didn't stop driving until I reached my house. The jeep rattled and groaned, but it held together long enough to get me to safety. Once I was inside, I locked every door and window, my hands still trembling as I clutched the shotgun I kept in the closet. It's been 2 weeks since that day, and the stitches on my arms and hands are healing, though the scars will remain as a permanent reminder of what happened. I haven't been back to work since. The company has sent me messages, offering new assignments, but I've ignored them all. I can't bring myself to climb another tower, not after what I saw. The mist has returned to the mountains, a constant, oppressive presence that fills me with dread. Every time I look out my window and see it creeping through the trees, I can't help but feel like something is watching me, waiting. The text messages from the company keep coming, but I know one thing for certain: I'll never answer them. Not now, not ever.